Order. Please join me in the pledge. All right, you can take the roll, please.
Trustee Spurling. Here. Trustee Lee. Here. Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Here.
All right, we're all here this evening. Go ahead and move on to public participation this evening. If there's any member of the public wishing to speak. Shar? All right, hearing none. Move on to item 5 already. Items for discussion. Item A, Lakewood Creek Drainage Investigation. And with that, I will swing it to Engineer Wallers.
Thank you. Good evening.
I apologize for that.
Thanks for the musical
Introduction?
I appreciate it.
Apparently you were taking too long to get up there.
Yes, understood. Well, we wanted to report back to you on the findings from the Lakewood Creek Drainage Investigation. And Jeff, maybe go to the next slide. I'll start off with some background information. And as we all know, we had a pretty significant storm in April. We measured about 5.5 inches of rain. And in terms of just comparative, it's in Kane County, they set the 100-year rainfall at 7.58 inches. So it's, it's not a 100-year storm, but it has,
Is your microphone on?
it is.
Yeah.
He didn't believe you.
Okay, so can you hear me all right, or no?
I can hear you just
I can
fine.
hear you, I just can't hear him on the speakers at all, but I don't think I should derail your presentation, though.
That's
just
all right.
as a-
So, all right, so just getting back to try to put things, we try to put things in perspective when we do analysis. And so it wasn't a 100-year storm, but a couple of observations that we made even in April. One was we had, if you recall, we had some pretty high river levels at the time, in excess of 50-year flows. And Mike and I just recently met with Fox Metro to talk about sanitary sewer flows, and they had reported 100-year flows at their plant. So my point is the storm, while it had less rainfall, it had significant runoff, and we did witness probably higher than what we might think the reoccurrence interval was. So it was a significant storm by a lot of accounts, and so a good one to test facilities and that sort of thing. So obviously, the Lakewood Creek West Detention Basin, what we observed was very long drawdown times, and that was the critical issue. Public Works interceded, tried to help the homeowners with some support with sandbags, also brought in an auxiliary pump to reduce the water level of the detention basin, things like that. What we've observed as part of our investigation was that the depressional area where the water was stored is the Commonwealth Edison easement. And what we've determined is it just has a limited outlet. It's outletted basically virtually by infiltration, some connection to a field tile system, so pretty limited. In order for us to do what we thought was a necessary analysis, we used a model that's called the Stormwater Management Model, sometimes referred to as a SWIM model. It's a computer model, but it has the ability to do both pipe networks and overland and flow. So it's kind of a sophisticated model. We haven't used it in a lot of projects here in Montgomery, but we've used it in other urban settings when we have these more complicated situations, and we thought it was the correct model to use. So basically, the first step of that is to build an existing condition model, and the exhibit here shows watershed event and the routing of the storm sewers. I don't know if there's a laser pointer anywhere. So, anyway, the top of the exhibit is Route 30. You can see the blue basin on the far top to the right is basically the Stewart Sports Complex detention area. And then on the the left of that, north of 30, is the Foxmore Basin there. That drains into a culvert, crosses Route 30, and then goes into the Commonwealth Edison easement and eventually makes its way to the Lakewood Creek West detention area. Then that comes down to the next detention area, which is in Blackberry Crossing, and then finally down to another detention basin in Blackberry Crossing, and then out to Blackberry Creek. And when the Blackberry Crossing subdivision went in, we installed a separate outlet pipe for that subdivision to drain it, because we don't like to rely on existing field tiles or things like that. And we did the same thing when we did Foxmore and Fairfield subdivisions, and that's been our common practice. So we have our own dedicated storm sewer. We worked with the township to get it through Willowbrook, and that's there. So that's the good news. So that set the set the basic geometry of what we're at. So what we observed then was the drainage basin, the first one that's in Lakewood Creek West, was based on the area of the Commonwealth Edison depressional area and the area of Route 30 right-of-way. And what we have found out is that it really didn't account for off-site flows to bypass those off-site flows. And that drainage area that could have been bypassed is the area that's tributary to the 24-inch culvert that drains into the Commonwealth Edison depression. And what we've learned is that the basin restrictors really didn't have the capacity to bypass that flow, and that's really what backed up the water in that Commonwealth Edison easement. So that's kind of what we learned. Then in order to figure out a solution to that, we had two premises. One, we felt like we could look at upsizing the restrictors of those three basins that we talked about, and also try to figure out a way to bypass some of those off-site flows. So we've come up with some short-term and long-term recommendations. We've gone over these with village staff. Mike and I have had several meetings on this study and kind of gone through it, and we have some recommendations we'd like to discuss tonight. So the first thing that we realized was the restrictor at Lakewood Creek West North Basin is a 6-inch restrictor. We think it's too small. We're recommending we pull that restrictor plate out to utilize the full discharge capacity of the sewer from that detention basin. But as we looked at the model, in order to be really effective, we need to go all the way downstream and upsize the restrictors on all of the other two basins so that we can pass through those off-site flows. Now that is allowed under the county ordinance. You're allowed to bypass flows. So we're still within our stormwater management ordinance. But we think that by doing that, that'll help reduce some of the standing water. Won't eliminate it, but it'll reduce some of that standing water. You always try to store as much water in your detention basin as you can, but in this case, I think one thing we haven't done in the past, which I think going forward we would recommend, is to do more of this comprehensive modeling. When we started doing a review of subdivisions, back in 2000, the village insisted on doing the distribution system modeling so that we could determine the size of water mains throughout the entire system. We had a model for the whole village. We could put it in, we could do our fire flow tests, and then we would dictate to the developers what to do. We really never got to that point with stormwater where we built a comprehensive model and then tested it. And I think going forward, when development restarts, that's probably something that would be good, I think, for us to do, to control that so that we can see this. Because what happens is you get a little myopic when you look at one subdivision. It meets all the code requirements, but you don't see the cascade effect that's tied back to it. So that's the lesson learned. So this short-term solution is to remove the restrictor pipes at the various 3 detention basins. The preliminary cost estimate was about $20,000. Mike has actually gone out and got some real numbers that he can speak to, but that was our first cut at the numbers. And then, of course, how do you fund it? I think the things that we could consider would be obviously general fund, CIP fund, special assessment or special service area. And maybe when we get to the end, I can have Steve comment on any of those funding mechanisms. I just want to run through the second phase of the project. So the long-term recommendations would be to bypass the water that collects in the depressional area. So the water that comes across in the 24-inch storm sewer, we want to get that around the depressional area so it doesn't sit there, because I think that standing water in there is a contributor to the high groundwater and some of the other problems that those homeowners have, not so much with surface flooding, but with just high flows in their building footing drains, things like that. So that, to do that, is about $113,000. We could also add an additional secondary outlet through Lakewood Creek. That would be $20,000. Funding sources for that then would be CIP funds, special assessment or special service area, or grants. I think that's one we would look at. Now, just a couple of other things. That storm that occurred in April, if you might recall, Stewart Sports Complex had just been seeded. We really didn't have grass growing on the north side of 30. It just had been blanketed. We suspect that we got more runoff because of the nature of that site as well, because it wasn't vegetated. So we're thinking, the short-term solution is something that would be wise to implement soon, but the long-term solution, we may want to observe performance of that north side of 30 to the extent that we might need this improvement. We think it's probably ultimately going to be needed, but whenever you model anything, you're trying to reproduce things that happen in nature, and unfortunately, we never get a design storm in nature. It's always some storm, that is got, like you may have a rainstorm in February on frozen ground and you get totally different performance. So, but again, we think long-term this would be necessary. This exhibit depicts what that would be. It's basically taking a 24-inch storm sewer from Route 30, extending it down and putting it into the basin then at Lakewood Creek West. So that would basically keep the water that pools in that depressional area, just move it through and get it out of there. So, and then we would tie into an additional outlet at Lakewood Creek, which has capacity to handle that additional flow, again, within the rights because it's a bypassing of offsite flow. So we haven't breached any issues with the ordinance. It's just an improvement upon, what's happening. So we're trying to avoid that depressional storage if we can. So that's our first preliminary analysis of things. We wanted to give you a report and then, try to get some direction from the board as to what you might think some steps of approach would be now. So with that, we'd take questions.
First, did you want to hit off on the SSA funding thing?
Yeah, I thought that would be appropriate. Thank you, Pete. If you look back on the slide regarding short-term recommendations, maybe we start there. We're talking about a $20,000 expense. Certainly, the first two options, either the general fund or the CIP fund, are self-explanatory. They're your money. You can spend it as you see fit. The more nuanced options are the second two, which is either a special assessment or the existing special service areas out there. Let's talk about special service areas first. You've got 2 or 3 that are implicated by this. Is it 2 or 3, Pete? Do you recall? I think it's 2. Lakewood Creek West and Blackberry Crossings. Okay. Lakewood Creek West is not active. Okay, it is a non-levied SSA. It's only a backup in the event that they don't maintain their basins. Blackberry Crossings is active, so that one gets levied every year. If you wanted to levy against these, you have every legal right to do it, and I think it's legitimate because it relates to the basin. You're talking about removing restrictor pipes at or in the basin. So I think legally you'd be entitled to do it. There's a practical problem, though. Blackberry Crossing, it's active, you could add to it, and maybe nobody would notice, maybe they would notice that it went up slightly. Lakewood Creek, since it's not active, means you would have to activate it, which would mean everybody would notice. I don't care, but I'm just telling you that there is a distinction, and you can't do one without the other. In other words, you can't unfairly burden Blackberry since it's already active. You'd need to activate both. So, whether you want to do that or not, that's up to you, but that's the practical implication of that. The special assessment is very different. That doesn't exist right now for these properties. That's a court process by which we go to the court and we say, Judge, these properties are being burdened by this problem. We need to fix it, and it needs to be allocated to the properties that specifically benefit from it. That's fine, we can do that. I wouldn't recommend doing it for a $20,000 problem, though, because it'll probably cost $20,000 to impose the levy, and now you just doubled it. The other problem with it is that when you talk about special assessments, you're talking about the benefited properties. That isn't the whole subdivision. that might be 5 homes. And so suddenly, who's paying for it necks down significantly. So again, that's kind of a problem. Can you do it? Absolutely. You tell me to do it, I'll go do it. But those are the implications of each of those choices. Obviously, the easiest choice for the short-term fix is using your general fund or your CIP fund, but that's for you to decide. Then if you shift to the long-term conditions, on the second to last slide, I think, third to last slide, page 4 on the printout, the circumstances are the same. CIP fund, I suppose general fund is still available. Special assessment, special service area. Now, because it's a much larger expense, maybe you do want to consider activating the Lakewood Creek SSA for it. However, you're also talking about improvements that aren't strictly limited to the basins. You're talking about, piping and things like that. So there's some weakness to the argument that it's actually just about the SSA, or about what the SSA is for. So that kind of throws that into question. Special assessment is still valid, and now that the price has gone up significantly, the cost of creating it goes down. So maybe it's more cost justified. Problem is, who are the benefited properties again? If it's everybody, probably not a bad thing. If it's 5 homes, it's a hugely bad thing. So again, these are all, I can't give you the right answer. All I'm telling you is that these are factors in that analysis of how to pay for it. Obviously, if there's grants, that's an awesome answer.
I have a comment. We just spent X number amount of dollars on Third Avenue, and they have drainage problems. Now, they don't have, it wasn't a special service area, it wasn't a special assessment. But if I was in one of those subdivisions, I would come to the village board and I would say, hold on a minute. Some of my tax dollars are going to pay for that infrastructure improvement over on Third Avenue that doesn't benefit me. Why am I being levied, or why am I having to pay into the SSA, or why am I being assessed for this? So, I mean, if you decide to do an SSA or a special assessment, there's going to be a lot of pushback. There are going to be a lot of unhappy people. And I understand that it benefits that subdivision, but as a board member, I wouldn't support that, because we just spent thousands of dollars and are looking at spending thousands of dollars more on Third Avenue. So we've got to be fair to everybody. Now, I would absolutely support grants. Is there any possibility that because the water is coming off of the ComEd area, would they be on the hook for any of this because it's coming off their property?
Well, I think it's really just pooling in that low area on the Commonwealth Edison property. So they're not really the contributor of that water. It's just, they just happen to be the low spot. We looked at other alternatives on that property to move the water through, but the piping alternative was the least cost and most effective. So I wouldn't think we could, the best we're going to hope for from them is cooperation, I think.
Okay. Doug, did you have something?
My question was going back to the channeling it to the Lakewood Creek because it has capacity. Do we get anywhere near a threshold where if we get another one of these storms, that now we've just moved the problem from Lakewood Creek West to now it's going to be overcapacity at Lakewood Creek because of a volume issue? So now we've just moved the impact further down the road.
Right. Based on what we've learned today, we don't think that's the case. We would certainly take a closer look at it if we elect to go into that direction. And as I say, we would like to see, it'd be nice to see some additional performance of the Stewart Sports Complex and how it operates a little bit. But based on what we saw with the model so far, we don't believe that would be the case.
Okay.
I think we're premature in even talking about a special assessment or a special service area. we never have in the past for $20,000 short-term. I mean, even to bring it up just causes people to start thinking that we could do it, and we never have ever in the past that I know of, and 20,000, we're just gonna have to come up with it somewhere in the budget, but, short-term, I can't see even discussing it, because the developer's long gone by now, and that's the one you'd have to hit, and he's gone, so, and if lay it on 5 people or even 50 people is not, it's just not the way for 20,000 that we should be even thinking about.
Okay. I think at this point, we have a pretty great idea that there is a long-term problem that, I don't mean to speak for anybody else, but this is not an FY14 solution, I don't think.
Right.
So I think at this point, don't want to kick that around too much, because I think we'll be talking about it again, the long term, but tonight it would be good to get direction from the board if this short-term solution for the 20,000 is something that we want to either squeeze out of FY13 or FY14. Is that what you're kind of?
Right, the long-term solution will come back as part of a future budget, but we need to know if you would like us to do the short-term solution, and if so, do you want us to do it this year? We would probably use just general fund reserves if we were doing it this year, or we can wait and do it as part of the fiscal year 15 budget.
Oh, we're in 14, aren't we?
Yeah. So I guess that's really what we're looking for.
Wasn't there something plugged too, Pete, that you said they,
Well, we've had problems with the 6-inch restrictor because this happened once before, and we did clear that obstruction and it drained. This was a more significant rainfall, but I think that 6-inch restrictor is prone to possibly plugging, and that, adds to the problem. So we really believe removing that is important, but in order to be totally successful, we need to remove the other ones too and do that downstream work. So, but definitely that one needs to be pulled.
Okay. On the short-term solution, I do think that it's something that we should probably most definitely try to include in FY15 in next year's budget. If we can find some funds for I guess all we're talking about is spring, really, is the only time left in FY14, because you're not going to put it in now. I guess you could.
Well, our goal would be to do the work this fall.
This fall?
We may have to go back in the spring and do some restoration, but the first basin is relatively easy. It's pulling out the restrictor. The other two are replacing some existing pipes, so I think it's work that can be done yet this year. That would be our intention.
I
spring
see,
will probably be more water, being the same thing. You plug up next spring and you're having the same
Right.
problem, so.
And here we've outlined, that it will flood again in the future at some point. And I was in the guy's basement, Steve and I went over there, and one of the guys is shoveling this rocks out of his foundation and whatnot. This is creating property damage to people's homes. And now that we know about the problem, I think it's important or our responsibility to act on it. So if we can outline funds yet in this year, in this fiscal year, is that something the board would support, just getting this done before the end of the year? If we,
do we have the money to do it?
We have general fund reserves we could use for it. That's where it would come from, so we don't have any.
Engineer Wallers had alluded, we have a preliminary cost here, and he had alluded that you, Mike, have actual costs?
Some of them, I've got a quote from a contractor to provide labor and equipment. I think we could come in about 3/4 of this estimate, around $15,000 or $16,000. It may run a little higher, but basically, it's fairly simple work, so it may not even cost us the $20,000. I think that should be our adopted budget, but I believe we can come in under that by a few thousand.
If you got that money in the reserve for this year, you ought to do it in this budget now, because you're gonna keep piling more in the 14-15 budget. And you get this 20,000 out of the way now, because you don't know what's gonna come down the line.
okay,
I would agree to do it now.
I don't hear anybody opposed to the idea, so if you can get something on the next agenda so we can approve that, so you guys can move forward with that.
I think my intent was, because of the cost of the project, to work
Yeah.
through the village
yeah.
administrator's authorization limits. It's under $20,000 to, I've got a quote, we can get an agreement to Administrator Zofel in the next day or two and get started on the work if that's acceptable.
Is anybody opposed to that method? Okay, and then just report back to us after that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. If there isn't any other comment on that, we'll move forward to the investment policy. And with that, I'll turn it over to our, for the first time, actually, our Director of Finance, Justin Van Voren.
First time for everything, right? I understand this is a long document, it's 11 pages long. Really what this addresses is just the general economic climate of the last few years. Looking at the policy that has been presented in the past, really just mirrored the state statutes. Thank you, Steve. And so what I've done here is I provided a cover with a summary. Really what we're looking at is the primary objectives. The safety of the money is of the utmost importance. And so it's safety, liquidity, and then return is the last objective. This addresses collateralization. The policy provides more accountability on all levels. It defines what is covered in terms of funds. Right now, the policy that we have really doesn't address which funds are covered, so this adds that. It addresses ethics issues or conflicts of interest that might exist in this policy. And then it also adds a reporting aspect to the board on a monthly basis. The Director of Finance, myself, would provide to the board a report on a monthly basis. I'm not going to go through this line item by line item, but if there's any specific questions, I can certainly address it. The other thing I want to point out, what this, the intent would be, and this is at the bottom of the memo, that I would also bring forward resolutions to expand the different investments that we can invest in right now. There's two investment pools, IMET and IIIT. Those two investment pools would just provide another option for us to invest in if we needed to. So if there's any questions, I can certainly address them.
Thank you. Are there any questions,
I
Justin?
have a question.
Teresa?
Justin, when I went through the document, the funds you were just referencing, are we able to invest in other states' investment pools?
We are not able to invest in other states' investment pools.
Thank you.
Denny?
Not being in the banking business, who is North Community Bank?
North Community Bank, Oswego
We go Community
Community
Bank.
Bank just merged with.
Just merged with the Mascot. All right. Okay.
Okay.
Be our intention then to put the resolutions Justin was speaking of that will allow us to invest in IMET and IIIT on the consent agenda, if that's okay with everybody. It just gives us, again, some other options of where we can invest the money.
Okay. All right, and if you are reading this late at night tonight and you have questions for Justin tomorrow, go ahead and shoot him a call, he'll be very excited. All right, thank you, Justin. All right, move on to Genesis Community Church request.
I will handle
Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
We were just following up from the presentation we had previously from the church. Mr. Albright came, Chet Albright came in, and we currently have, we're basically acting as the lender. And what it calls for is at the end of 5 years, there's a balloon payment where they have to pay off the rest of it. They came and I guess made a few requests. They wanted to see about moving that balloon down the road at some point. They asked about us re-amortizing the loan over a new 20-year period, starting, now and going forward. And they asked about a lower interest rate. They're currently at 4.5% interest. The balloon payment will come June of 2015, I believe. Because as I looked today, it looked like their first payment they made to us was in June of 2010. So really, we just wanted to come back, because we didn't come to any resolution that night, and see if the board is interested in making any changes to the current agreement, and if so, what you're interested in changing.
Okay. Who wants to go first?
If this-
I
if
mean,
this- Go ahead.
after the presentation, I have a couple of concerns with the village being a bank. I understand in the economic climate when the building was sold and everything, but to now continue that loan out 25 years, essentially, that, it worries me about the village and the precedent-setting nature of that. Because if we do it for them, how do we say no to the next person? The dynamics there. I understand it was Village Hall, and it was, at the time, it was a very good thing to do and to help make things happen. I'm just concerned about the impact of it down the road.
That's why we said it the way we did, because we knew it was a tough time then, but we thought if we gave them 5 years, that would give them time to, things to turn around, they could find alternate funding. Because yes, we're not in the mortgage business.
Yeah.
I understand they came back, though, to you, Jeff, and said that they would go with the 4.5 for another 5 years, and that's it. I mean, keeping the same, they're not asking for a balloon anymore, they're not asking for a 3.5, they're asking 4.5 for another 5 years
Right, I'd heard they're willing to keep the same interest rate.
terms.
And that's without re-amortizing? No re-amortization? Leaving everything just the way it
As
is?
it is, but we would move the balloon as it were down the road.
I had the same concerns as trustee Marisak. I think we have to be very careful to not jump into the lending business. That's not how we function. That's not something that we should be doing. In terms of the existing loan, I actually would be okay with moving that balloon out, modifying the current loan. But I think if we were to try to rewrite or write a new loan, we're in lending, and that's not what we do.
Okay.
I would like to leave the current agreement in place and consummate it as it's written. The balloon essentially is bringing money back to the capital improvement fund that I think for the last 3 consecutive meetings, we've had topics where capital improvement was our issue, and where to find the funds to pay for it was the problem. So I don't think we can justify leaving this pool of money set aside somewhere off in the future when we have so many pressing needs for it now. So while it's a good cause and it's tempting, the greater good for the greater number of people is to put that money into public works.
Would these funds be money that we could be using towards putting in the tornado siren that we discussed? And it just becomes part of
It
capital?
would go into the
fund?
capital improvement fund, so
Okay.
that's certainly one use you could have for it.
It would go into the capital improvement fund in 2015. So if we have the tornado siren slated for next year, I mean, but
not-
yes, it would be replenishing the fund that those monies are coming from.
I'm not for renewing it.
Okay,
Leave it like it is.
All right.
I mean, they've got some time to find a lender, and from what he indicated, they could find a lender. The rates just weren't very appealing.
See, my biggest concern with the whole thing is that extending the agreement was one thing, and when he came here and made a presentation, he requested much more than that. At the same meeting where we were having drainage problems, that's all, not, I don't want to say underfunded, it's not funded. We don't have funding for our capital improvements. So I think maybe that was a blessing in disguise that happened at the same meeting, so we don't make a mistake and extend it. But getting into that mortgage business, let's say we were to go out for a sales tax referendum, how would that sit with any one of us as residents? That we don't have money for our capital improvements, so we need to raise the sales tax, but at the same time, we're in the lending business. So I just think that that's a rough situation. I also was under the impression that they could not get a loan, and he indicated otherwise, that they could get a loan. So it sounds like it's the opinion of the majority of the board that we don't modify the agreement at this time, and that we should probably send them a letter that states that, just so that everybody's clear at 2015 that that balloon payment is either due, or they can come before the board at that time, because that will be a different board. And we can go from there. But I think it was important that we have this on the agenda so we can actually discuss it, make a decision, and then put it to rest or do something with it, so.
And to just clarify, if they can in fact get that commercial loan, we're now competing against the bank because we're providing a lower interest rate than a commercial facility who's in the business of lending money. So we're actually undermining our local banks that might have an opportunity to capture that loan. We're now taking out the feet out from underneath them. So I think that we're competing against our own community.
I recommend your idea, send them a letter that we're not gonna do it.
Okay. Are there any other comments, discussion on that? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to item D this evening, which is dispatch update. And with that, I will turn it over to the Chief of Police, Dan Myers.
Thank you very much. Good evening. In front of you tonight is a memo that I wanted to update you on the status of the dispatching. On September 24th, Aurora Township Fire Department moved to KenCom, so everything's been going very good for Aurora Township Fire. On October 8th, Montgomery Fire Department also moved to KenCom. Their decision to go with us was because we police most of their districts. Waubonsee Community College is set to go to TRICOM on this Thursday, October 24th. Now, their decision was mainly because Sugar Grove Fire and Sugar Grove Police are close to them, and they went to TRICOM, so they wanted to go to TRICOM also. They've been testing radios for the last week to 10 days, so that process is going to be completed this Thursday. On the 29th at 6:30 a.m., we will be switching our dispatch services to KenCom. Armando Sanders, my deputy chief, and Liz Palco, administrative sergeant, have been working with KenCom weekly for the last several months on this transition. We're all set to go. We're excited for the change. We've had great success with Call One, AT&T, En route 911 MobileCat, our New World systems, and KenCom on this transition along with AT&T. So I know it's been a long process, but we're looking forward to a week from today. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any questions of the chief?
That's gonna save us how much, approximately $500,000 a year?
I'd say 400 to 500,000 figure.
We'll put that in the general budget then?
Yeah, that'll be in the general fund. That's what
Okay.
it is now.
But fund, I meant to say.
Is that 400,000 to 500,000 actual savings? Or are we losing that in other
No, that's the same.
things?
No, I mean, I think that should be close to
That-
accurate.
That's
yeah,
actual
that
dollars?
netted out about the savings, because the number was like 7 something,
Right.
but when you figured out what we were being paid back, it netted out about 5.
Okay.
All right. Move on to department updates.
Dan?
Thank you. Last Saturday, we had a Team Montgomery Walk for Hope for a fundraiser for Mutual Ground. Employees from the Police Department and Public Works participated in that walk and raised over $1,000 for Mutual Ground. This Saturday, we have the Drug Enforcement Agency Take Back Initiative from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We would like you to drop off your prescription drugs to keep the waterways safe. We'll properly dispose of them through the DEA. That is Saturday, October 26th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you. The leaf pickup services for the village have begun. We've had a crew out intermittently this week, not too many piles of leaves yet, but that'll start to pick up. So that'll continue generally through around the end of November. Of course, it's all weather dependent and on how quickly the leaves fall. So we'll continue with that service. Just a quick update on Boulder Hill. All of the water main under this first phase, except for the loop from Ashlawn to Seabold, has been installed. You'll remember that we've had some challenges with the directional drilling on that final loop, but we think we found a solution, and we're targeting, I believe, next week to begin that operation. So hopefully by the end of October, we'll have all the water main in. All but 20 of 194 service connections have been reestablished. So we've got 20 people still on the old main, but we'll be wrapping those up very soon. There is still some water main abandonment to be done. So again, we have a few people to switch over. We're still working on tree installation and turf restoration. There's a fair amount of that to be done. Pavement restoration is underway. That will probably run into early November. So we're pushing the weather a little bit on that, but with some luck here, we'll get that all wrapped up. And some driveway and sidewalk still to be poured. But again, the concrete contractor will be in again next week. So again, things are coming to a close here quickly. So I would anticipate within the next 3 to 4 weeks, the majority of the work will be done. So I meet, weekly with IDOT, but every other week on either the US 30 widening project or the Illinois 31 interchange project. So today I met with IDOT on the US 30 widening project. And their goal between now and the end of November is to complete the intersection work on the Montgomery side of Douglas Road and 5th Street. So the next phase of that you'll see is their creation of a right turn lane. Right now we're on old pavement going to old Route 30 pavement. They need to create a single right turn lane so they can do a little bit more new pavement in there. Again, this is all just staging so traffic can ultimately get through. But within the next couple of weeks, they'll switch traffic over to the new pavement that was recently poured on Douglas and 5th and start the removal of the northbound lanes. And their goal is to get all that removal and replacement work done by the end of November so that over the winter, the new pavement on Douglas Road north of 30 and 5th Street north of 30 will be in place, and then they will switch traffic over to the new Route 30 lanes. So over the winter, people will be driving on the newly constructed Route 30 lanes. A big portion of the contractor's winter work then will be tearing out the current lanes that are still in, the eastbound lanes. So a little bit of a jumble there, I apologize, it's throwing a lot of information, but, so they've got a lot of work on their plate here for the next month and a half. They're confident they can get it done. They also said that the sound barrier wall on the north side of Route 30, west of Douglas, will also be installed by the end of November. Over the next few weeks, they'll be working on the foundations. Those come in precast sections. They'll be pouring foundations for each of those. And then the following 2 weeks after that, they'll be installing the panels. So again, their goal is to have the sound barrier wall up in time by the end of this construction season. So, a lot of work to do, but it is moving along. I believe that's all I have. Thank you. Oh,
Question. Go ahead. Was there any pushback about the overnight sawing?
We've had a few people contact us on noise in general. I wasn't contacted on the late night, overnight sawing. I don't know. I understand the police department, 3. Dan had 3 people call. We did get a lot of advance notice on that, but with the notice we had, we got information out on our website and on our Facebook page. I know not everyone looks at those
Nixle did
places,
as
but in
well.
Nixle too, yes, thank you. Yeah, Dan recommended that. It was a good idea. So I thought we were fairly proactive in trying to get the word out. As I've shared with people, you know, we want to abide by the noise ordinances, but there's some work that it's just very difficult to do during the times allotted with the ordinance. So I reminded the contractor today, early morning start has been probably the most frequent concern I've heard, and it hasn't been overwhelming. It's been less than half a dozen calls or emails to me. But I reminded them about not starting prior to 7 a.m. on their normal work, so.
Mine was just a general question. I think it was a great use of time to try to be able to do that and not lose all that time. But
I remind people or try to encourage people to think about what a great project we'll have when it's all over. So there may
And that
be,
it'll be done
there may be a little
sooner.
pain in between. Hopefully it'll be minor, but
no, when I got to Nixle, I was pleasantly surprised at the utilization of the time to do that.
During one of the last updates, you said due to weather that they were approximately a month behind. Have they gained any time?
they have not.
What do they plan on doing to get up to speed and up to?
That was a hot topic between the Department of Transportation and the contractors' staff today. At this time of the year, there's not a whole lot they can do to make up that deficit. They'll be looking to their spring activities. They hope to get an early start in the spring, but there's no guarantee that they will make up that time. That all stems back from the spring rains that we had. At that time, they were doing mostly earthwork, cutting ditches and building embankment, and they'd get some cut, it would rain, it would take a few days to dry, et cetera. That just repeated itself, so they're still about a month behind, is what they're
When's the
reporting.
project supposed to be done?
August of next year. So there's a possibility with any big job that it could go longer, but I don't think there's, at this point, I think it's very probable it will be done next year. I can't see it going into the following year, but it may be after August.
The contractor needs to do what they need to do to get it done on time. I'm a contractor, that's what we do.
Yeah.
So,
And you understand, many of you understand about working days and calendar days that are allotted in the contract, and I don't know all the details of the IDOT contract, I haven't read that, but IDOT was very clear today on the need to find solutions to
things
make
up.
up some of that time and what the contractor's rights and responsibilities are. And the contractor understood that, they're not trying to shirk their duties, so.
But from our standpoint, I think this was delayed for, bless you, for 15 or 20 years due to funding some of these, so
in
I'll settle,
1995.
happily settle for a month if it ends up being a month behind on a project that's not inside our realm, so. Is the 3031 also behind too?
It is about a month behind
That's what I
also.
thought. Okay.
ditto what I said about 30 for 3031.
Justin?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. We are doing first interviews this week for the Director of Community Development. We're doing those on Thursday. And I believe we'll be looking to the first week of November for the second interviews, but I will supply you with more information on that later this week, after we've had the first interviews.
All right. Move on to new or unfinished business this evening. Come before the board. You want to lead off, Stan?
Well, I can explain maybe the object that's
See, I can't
in
even
front
see
of our
it.
president. A few weeks ago, President Browley mentioned a concept that's new to most of us, I think, called Little Free Library. And in doing some homework on it, it's a fairly new and a rapidly growing idea to facilitate book sharing at the neighborhood level for books that your children may have outgrown or books that you've read and wouldn't mind exchanging with a neighbor to pick up some fresh reading material. We've done some talking with other communities that are employing this program, Glen Ellen, Wheaton, Elgin, and their response to it has been very encouraging. People like the idea. It encourages community interaction. It encourages reading, and both among children and adults. So our thought was, with this unit, which just arrived today, that maybe this would be the focal point for some discussion in Montgomery about launching a program of this nature and taking it to the various neighborhoods that we have. They need a sponsor and someone who will kind of look after it. And there's a cost involved in either building them or buying them. So we have some hurdles to overcome, but that's what you see before you is an unfinished, undecorated Little Free Library that's designed to weather the kind of climate we have and be outdoors all year round and protect the books that are inside it. So we would welcome feedback from the public, and we would especially welcome people who are able to help support the program.
Awesome. And a friend of mine lives in Glen Ellen, and she takes her 4-year-old son there once a week or so, and it's like the highlight of his day to go there and pick up a couple new books. So kind of hoping that this idea is something that people might embrace in Montgomery on private property, on their own lots. And I think Plan Commission is set to discuss, or will discuss this at their next meeting, making sure that it fits in our ordinances. So if there's any questions or comments, you can direct them to Stan or myself.
So the idea is that I, as a homeowner, say I want one of these, get it put in my yard, and then people in the community come and do it? That's the
Yeah.
concept?
Take a book, leave a book.
Some of you adults, if you'd like, I could give you a Packer Paper Plus so you kind of read about it. The winner,
We want this to get off to a good start, you know.
one right in there for you.
It looks flammable, so those might burst into flames at my house.
One other comment that might be helpful, Attorney Anderson was just at a Illinois Library Association.
Actually, Architect Anderson, my wife was.
Okay. And they were featuring some of these displays there as well, and building awareness and support for the program. So we're on the edge of something that's kind of new and kind of fun.
Certainly. Thank you. Is there anything else to come before the board this evening? All right, hearing none, we have no executive session this evening, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Have a second? Take the roll, please.
Trustee Heinz.
Yay.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
And we're adjourned. Thank you.
All right, so I gotta go check out the birdhouse.
That looked pretty good in your yard.
I thought that